Hello and welcome to the March Recreational Astronomy Night Meeting online edition of the Toronto Centre RASC. My name is Paul Markov, and aside from introducing the speakers, I also search for presentations for upcoming meetings. If you have a presentation in mind, please get in touch with me. We have openings for the May and later meetings, which are held on the first Wednesday of each month. Before we start with the presentations, I'd like to thank in advance our technical team comprised of Andrew and Better Reed, Blake Nancaro, Emma Seabrook, Ward Legros, and Anu Cholucci. Thank you all for making these online presentations possible for all of us. We have 3 speakers lined up for this evening, and I expect to be done around 9:30 as usual. The speakers for tonight are Denis presenting the sky this month, followed by Kerry-Ann Lecky Hepburn talking to us about adventures in lightscaping under the night sky. And finally, Jerry Vila will wrap up the presentations. He'll talk to us about Tycho Brahe, Danish astronomer, and his legacy. Finally, Tom Luton will deliver the announcements as usual. If you have any questions, please enter them into the YouTube chat box, and Emma will ask the speaker the question on your behalf. Also, if you're attending a meeting for the first time, whether you're a member or not, please say hello again through the chat box. I think we're ready to get the meeting started, so I'll turn it over to Denis Gray for the sky this month.
Hello, sorry about that. Welcome everybody, and thanks Paul for the introduction. I'm here to bring you the sky this month. One of the things that I like about this particular part of the presentation is that it's a great way to force me to go out and look ahead and see what kinds of comets and meteor showers and other things we have to look forward to each month. And I'll share with you my findings for March 2021 as we roll through it this evening. So the first thing I like to do is to go through the big picture, to talk a little bit about that, provide some highlights from the month. We'll talk about planets and the moon, what's going on, comets, and some other targets. Got a few unusual ones for today. So one of the things that I like to start with is sort of the big picture as we go through the year and the sun moves through its path. We can sort of see where we are in terms of the constellations and so on, and also see where things on the ecliptic are versus the solar system here. So one of the things you'll notice, first of all, is in the morning sky, we have a big pileup of planetary pileup, essentially both of the gas giants plus Mercury. Venus you can't even see because it's actually right behind the sun, and Pluto are all in the morning sky at the moment and pretty inaccessible to us, especially if you're not able to get up that early in the morning. Over in the evening sky here, we have Mars and Uranus. Uranus is setting before Mars right about now, and those are the 2 planets that we've got available to us in the evening sky. We're coming up to a disjunction here, I guess, in terms of the time of day. That's just the time change. It's coming up on March 14th. So right in the middle of this month, we're going to have the time change. We're going to spring forward, which is going to, essentially delay sunset for us in astronomy time by about an hour. But as you can also see, we're heading in a time of change. The light curve is flattening out. Right now we have about 11 hours of full daylight and about 9 hours of night, 9.5 hours of night. That's going to continue to decrease, and there'll be a noticeable change in that by month's end. Okay, so in terms of what we can see, I think it's always useful to ground things in terms of where our night sky is pointing in each time of the year. So right now we're basically looking out along the band of the Milky Way towards the outskirts of the galaxy. So we see some pretty big constellations like Orion and Taurus and so forth. Those are bright constellations, and there is a Milky Way behind them as well, but they are it's much fainter than the summer Milky Way, which we see looking straight onto the heart of the galaxy, and it's a lot brighter. But as we go through and end the winter season and head into the spring, we're going to be facing more and more outside of the plane of our galaxy, which means it's going to be much easier for us to see galaxies and other very deep sky objects going forward. In terms of what's up in the sky tonight, there's a couple of big asterisms, and this time of year is really good for seeing them. One is called the winter hexagon, which is this ginormous asterism that goes through all of the bright constellations in the winter sky. It's directly overhead right now, so it's easy to pick out those extra bright stars. It's actually an asterism that you can very easily see from Toronto. Another one that's similar is the winter triangle. Unlike the summer triangle, this triangle is almost perfectly equilateral, which makes it, in some people's books, a better triangle altogether. In terms of the planets, so I mentioned that essentially most planets except Mars are pretty well out of sight and hard to spot this time of year. Mars, though, is starting to fade. It's past its opposition, which was last October, and it's going down from 0.9 magnitude down to 1.2. However, if you have some opportunities to take some very wide-angle photos, it's photogenically placed between the Pleiades and the Hyades at the moment. So you can kind of get two, with a wide enough lens, you can get two nice star clusters and Mars in the same picture. As the month goes on, Jupiter and Saturn will be rising quite a bit earlier, so they will become a lot more visible in the morning sky. But one caution about that is that they're both near Sagittarius, so they're pretty low in the sky. So they're not, although they are, the separation that they have from the sun is increasing rapidly. Their separation from our horizon, which is really what matters the most, isn't increasing as fast. So through the course of March, we've got a number of pulses or close approaches by various things in the night sky. So later this week on Friday, I should say, Mercury and Jupiter will be connecting in the morning sky. That's going to be very close to the sun, but potentially really nice if you can spot it. As the moon is passing through, it will first pass Saturn, then Jupiter on the 9th and 10th, and then another day later, it will pass Mercury. So those are all pulses in the morning sky. None of these are particularly close. We're not talking like the Great Conjunction back in December. These are just, coming in within a hand's width of the other object. The Mars and the Moon will meet up around March 18th. And then there is one close approach, which I think might also be photogenic, which is Mars and Aldebaran. So Aldebaran is the eye of the bull. It's in the constellation Taurus. And Mars gets to fairly close to Aldebaran, about 7 degrees or so. But they're both almost exactly the same brightness, and they both have a distinct red hue. So again, if you're thinking of taking that wide-angle shot, maybe March 23rd, you could get the Hyades, the Pleiades, Mars, and Aldebaran, perhaps in one really nice picture. In terms of the moon, we kind of mentioned where it's going in terms of pulses, but here's the quarters that are coming up. I should mention that March 21st, which is very close to the spring equinox this year, the first quarter is going to be happening then. And I know some enthusiasts like to get out and check out the lunar X, and that's expected on March 21st. And spring arrives here in the Northern Hemisphere bright and early on March 20th, which, according to my calendar, is a Saturday. So that's when you can expect spring to spawn. In terms of comets, as I mentioned at the beginning, I do a research before these presentations looking for things to see, and the comet planning website, which is great as a website, disappointed me because there's just nothing going on up there. There is one periodic comet, magnitude, that's the brightest one right now, is magnitude 10.5, which isn't that bright really, and it's in Capricornus, which means it's in the morning sky, very low, basically, no, we're not going to see any comets this month. what about meteors? And I checked that out, and yes, nothing notable in meteors is expected this month either. So not ideal, but we persevere. Zodiacal light, yes, we can guarantee this. It happens every year. So right now, the zodiacal light is at its best in the western sky after sunset. It's not something that you'll see from Toronto for certain, just too much going on in Toronto. But if you do get out of town and the moon is not interfering, then you may be able to catch a glimpse of it, or better luck if you take a relatively short exposure, half a minute or a minute or something like that, with a good camera, then you might be able to get a picture like this one from Kerry-Ann Lecky Hepburn, which shows it kind of as this triangle here. I don't know how well that shows up on the call, but you can, at least on my screen, you can see that it's this bright triangle of light spearing up from the horizon, which represents microscopic dust in the plane of the solar system. So I kept digging further on this, and I came up with it's the beginning of mutual occultation season. People here will know I'm a bit of a fan of occultations, and mutual occultations these are events that occur when Earth's orbit crosses the orbital plane of the satellite. So normally satellites are going to cross like this. They're going to kind of go past each other, and one's going to go over the other. But during that short season, they line up perfectly. And Jupiter, this happens every 6 years. So twice during its 12-year orbit, we get these mutual occultations. So we're starting a season right now, tonight, and this observable season will go from March 3rd to November 16th. There's a useful website, which is this one here. It's a little French, but don't worry about it. And this website here, I'm just going to embiggen this a bit. So essentially, you put in your observatory code, and the observatory code for Toronto happens to be 777. There's a list here, and then you will get a list of all of the mutual occultation events for your location. So this is kind of cool in the sense that, you're getting pretty, this is an actual research site here, but you're able to pull up that list of events, but then you have to read it and interpret them in order to know what's going on. As your faithful companion on this, what I've done is I've pulled up the predictions for March, and of course, disappointed, but I'll just highlight here a little bit what I was able to figure out here. So the start time and the duration is kind of what you're looking for here. So some of these durations range from 3 seconds up to 20 seconds, and that's the time where the two satellites are passing in front of each other. The Jupiter satellite numbers are here. So this is satellite 1 occulting satellite 3. So that's Io and I believe Ganymede. This is Io and Europa and so on. So you're able to pick out the ones that are there. The magnitude here shows the magnitude of the two of them together. And the change in magnitude is the dimming caused by one of them going in front of the other. Now, the other handy things here are the calculations. So what percentage is the moon full? So this means the moon's going to potentially interfere. Where is the sun? So you're looking for a minus here, where this is actually below the horizon. This is degrees above horizon. And then this planet column is degrees above horizon. So you're looking for an event that happens not too late, because start time of 5:43 in the morning, not good. Then the sun should be below the horizon, also very important. That's 2 things. The planet needs to be above the horizon. That's 3 things. I'm not too worried about lunar interference because Jupiter punches through. And then obviously you want the delta magnitude to be, about half or 0.3 or something, so that you can detect the difference. So 4 things that all need to be kind of working together in order for you to really see any of these events. And for the months of March, it's a write-off. But there's a lot more, and there are some good ones. I noticed a good one on August 19th. So all is not lost, but definitely from this March, it's not going to really work out. Sorry about that. Other things we can keep an eye on: the minima of Algol. This is a good time to check out Algol, which is also known as the Demon Star. It goes from magnitude 2.1, which is brighter than this star here, and goes down to 3.4, which is just a little bit brighter than this one here. So as you watch this, you can see it going and descending in brightness or ascending as it comes back, and it's caused by an eclipse within that system. So there's a few evenings coming up where the timing is good, so that's maximum minimum. That's not a very good term, is it now? It's the most minimum. That's the minimum. That most minimum is pleasantly in the middle of the evening hours, and so you would be picking it up kind of close to its minimum, and then you'd be able to watch it get brighter and brighter until it's brighter than epsilon Persei here. So that's something to keep an eye open for. In terms of sky objects, open clusters are available. Cancer is directly overhead, so the Beehive cluster, which is a nice big loose cluster, is a very nice object to see in binoculars and also takes a good picture. Down south, there's a loose open group, M8048, which if you're looking for your Messier certificate is one of those trickier ones to get. You need to catch it about now and this time of the year because it's nice and available. In terms of the spring sky, so as we move from the winter sky into the spring sky, we're going to be bringing Leo into view. And so there's some very bright, nice Messier galaxies to see there. You can see roughly where some of them are located relative to the this is the butt of the lion, as it's known here. But also another highlight in Leo this spring is Vesta. So the brightest asteroid, magnitude 5.8 tonight, it's at opposition tomorrow. Although it was the fourth asteroid found, it's always been the brightest one. So compared to Ceres and other ones, it's significantly brighter. But this is actually almost unaided eye visibility if you know where to look. So you might be able to spot it with your unaided eye, and certainly any telescope or binoculars will pick it up. So if you get out and you're looking at those galaxies in Leo, take a moment and check out the current position of Vesta and take advantage of it. And just in context here again, so here's our winter constellations. There's Leo coming up in the east, and this is where M44 is right here in Cancer, and that's all on the ecliptic. One other thing that I should mention too is that it's always interesting to me when you think ahead to the summer season, and I know we're all looking forward to it. But Gemini here, the twins, this is the ecliptic. So this point here in the constellation of Gemini is the northernmost point that the sun will reach in about 3 months' time. So it's roughly one quarter of the way around the circumference of the sky, and it's roughly 3 months away is when the sun will be that high in the sky. Took a look at ISS predictions and found a few good ones. We're in an early morning season right now until March 15th, and there's evening passes from March 16th onward. One thing I noticed when I was looking at the evening passes is there's one here where the path of the ISS comes very close to the moon. So I asked myself, well, could we catch an IIS transit? Blake organized an expedition not that long ago where we were able to go and see the ISS fly across the moon. And yes, you can. There's a website called transitfinder.com, and for that ISS transit on the 21st that came close to the zenith as seen from Toronto, well, it went right over the zenith and across the moon in this line from Dunsville towards Niagara Falls. So if you wanted to travel, it's a weekend, you could go and potentially catch the ISS crossing the moon on the 21st, and it's at first quarter, so it would be backlit for part of its journey and a shadow crossing for another part of its journey. So hopefully that gives some people some ideas, some things, some projects to potentially take on. And I'm sorry I wasn't able to find any really good comments or things like that for this month, but hopefully the sky will give up some other good things in April. And that's it for today. Thanks. Any questions?
Hello. Thank you very much, Dennis, for a thorough this guidance month, as always. Let's go to Emma. Let's see if we have any questions online.
We have a couple of questions from the YouTube chat. The first question comes from Grace, and she wants to know if you can see the lunar X in the daytime.
Yes, you can. If the timing is right. So the lunar X is, I believe, it's kind of visible for about 4 hours, and it's centered on a specific time. So if you were to go and look at it in the daytime before that 4 or so hour window, you wouldn't see it, even if you could see the edge of the lunar. Well, it's not a crescent, but you know, the edge of the terminator. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you.
There's another question. Can you explain what zodiacal light is, please?
Yeah, it's if you think about it, as comets go through the sky, we see them giving off their tails, and that's reflected in the comet light. And what those tails are is they're tiny grains of dust that are basically coming off of a comet, and they're in orbit around the sun, just like the comet is around the orbit in the sun. And so all of that dust that's coming in from comets and things like that, it essentially hangs out in the inner solar system, and what you're seeing is the reflected light off of all of those millions and millions of tiny particles that are in orbit around the sun, but just really, really microscopic. So it's a little bit, people call it ghostly because it's this pearly glow, and it's a subtle effect. But if you can get to a dark sky, nice western sky, it's at its best at this time of year.
Thank you. Oh, there's another question coming from Blake. Is there an occultation of asteroid A-line coming up soon?
I don't know, Blake. I'm sorry. I'd have to look it up, and I would. But I can tell you what I'll do though is I'll do a quick lookup, and I will post it on the chat if I see any good occultations coming up this March.
Thank you. That's all the questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Dennis, once again.
All right, no problem. Thank you.
Let's move on to our next speaker, Kerry-Ann Lecky Hepburn. She'll be talking to us about adventures in lightscaping under the night sky.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, awesome. So in this presentation, I'll be sharing some of my more memorable experiences traveling the world, taking DSLR nightscapes. Even though we can't travel now, I hope, through this presentation, I will encourage you to not hesitate to get out and see the night sky from different perspectives on the planet, once things go back to normal, of course. So basically, it all started 3 years ago. Oh, here are a list of some of the countries that I'll be talking about. But it all started 3 years ago when I had the opportunity to travel to Chile. And basically, so on my flight down, I slept during the night, of course, during the nighttime of the flight. But then when I woke up, I was over Chile, and then I saw all these clouds. And then that's when I started to think, oh my goodness, everyone lied to me. They said Chile had, in the Atacama Desert in particular, they said that, you get 364 days a year of sunshine and clear skies. And this basically set the tone for my trip for 7 days in the Atacama Desert. I chose kind of the wrong time of year to go. It was around January, which tends to be more of the rainier season. But then I was kind of lucky. The first night, at least, I had some really amazing clear skies, but then I was so tired. But I really did push myself to try to take some pictures because I was worried that I wouldn't have the opportunity to take that many pictures after that night. And it was just so incredible because the sky was exploding with stars. So that was definitely true. What you hear, you feel like you can reach out and touch the sky. And one thing that was pretty amazing was seeing the Magellanic Clouds for the first time, and it actually put tears to my eyes because I never thought that I'd actually be able to or get the opportunity to see them. So some of the nights, it was either too cloudy, or on the left-hand side, that image there, that was one image that I took hiding slightly behind a car because it was so incredibly windy. So I just got that one shot. And then the shot on the right, now that was one of the last nights that I had in the Atacama Desert. And I was able to get a picture of this famous lonely tree. And you can see the lithium mine light lighting up in the background. And the Milky Way, it was the winter Milky Way. And this is probably one of my most favorite images. And this was towards the end of the night. And during the day, I was supposed to be catching my flight back home. But that particular morning, that was the first time that I got to see the zodiac light. And it was just such an eerie sight, because I thought that there was fog or mist in the air, haziness in the air. But then when I took the photo, I was able to see clearly on the camera what it was. So for this shot here, I ended up taking a number of frames, about 6 of them, and I stitched it together in Lightroom and then created that final image. And it was really rewarding because at the end, like when I came home and started working on the image and I posted it, I ended up getting a NASA astronomy picture of the day, and also it was featured in a Finnish magazine. They had like a full spread of that, so it was really cool. And basically this kind of started my whole traveling bug for the next 2 years. Afterwards, I became addicted. So from one desert to another, I ended up in Death Valley in the early part of summer or late spring. And again, this was not really the best time of year to travel to Death Valley. It was extremely hot. And the purpose of this trip, though, was to teach nightscapes and post-processing of nightscape images. And this place, Death Valley, is basically one of the hottest places on Earth, and with a record temperature of 56.7 degrees Celsius in Furnace Creek. And one thing I didn't realize about this place is that it's so huge and there was so much driving. So a 3-hour-long drive just was kind of like a normal trip in Death Valley. And it's just funny to put that into perspective, because here, you know, where we live in, or the Toronto area or Southern Ontario, the thought of driving up to Algonquin Park seems like such a long trek. But we were doing 3-hour drives daily on this trip. So one of the places that we visited was extremely iconic, and this was the racetrack Playa. On this road, it was, I'm not joking, it was 2 hours of extreme bumpy, rugged road, but it was really worth the trip in the end. The racetrack Playa, some of you might know of it as the famous place where you see the sailing stones, the stones that have the trails in the mud. And basically along the way to this racetrack Playa, there's this pit stop called Tea Kettle Junction. And when I saw this, I was thinking, oh goodness, this would be a pretty good place, a pretty good picture if I can situate it in a way where, you know, Sagittarius was right over it, the teapot. And I was just hoping that, you know, everyone in the group would agree that we would come back here at the end of the night to take some pictures when the Milky Way was nice and high and the teapot was in the right spot. So I'll get back to that later. But this is us now, like we're out in this racetrack Playa, and we're racing against the clock to set up our equipment and also find a good rock, because there's so many rocks. Some of them didn't have any trails coming out of them, and some of them were either too big or too small or too funny looking. So we're all, of course, perfectionist photographers trying to find the perfect composition. So here is mine. I didn't get so lucky, but you know, nonetheless, I started taking images. I had 2 cameras with me at the time, and this one I set up to do star trails. I wanted about 3 hours of star trails. And the other camera I was using just to take like regular Milky Way shots. And that was one of my star trail shots from that setup. And then later on in the night, I basically took the selfie with the photo with the camera that was taking the star trails. In this shot, though, I was taking, I'll show you the picture that that I was taking with that shot. But at a certain point in the night, I basically had to go back to the car, and that was about a 20-minute walk. And I really didn't expect to run into trouble where I wouldn't be able to find my way back to my camera setup. It was extremely dark, and you kind of take for granted how dark things can be in such a wide space. I didn't realize that I could only actually see 20 feet ahead of me, even with the flashlight. So on my way back to my camera equipment, I had to call out to the other people in the workshop to try to get them to help me to find where my setup was with my camera. And you know, finally I was able to find it quite a bit later on, but it definitely reminded me that, you know, whenever you're out in the dark, set a really accurate GPS point for different locations that different key locations that you have to be at. So with this picture here, I'm taking a selfie of me taking a picture of this shot here. So this was one of the best rocks that I could find with trails. Every year, apparently, it differs. The trail intensities can differ, and it's based on how much rain they get and different things like that. So now at the end of the night, we finally did actually make it back to the tea kettle junction. That picture I showed you with the tea kettles is basically a place where people will leave a kettle and then with a note, and it's apparently considered good luck if you take a tea kettle with the message, but then you also leave one with the message. So every year this tea kettle junction point actually changes. The kettles on display changes. So we started taking pictures of this, and of course, you know, there's always a struggle when you're photographing with a large group of people. There's some people that want to take light painted images, so they start shining their flashlight on the foreground while you're trying to take an exposure. And I was one of those people that didn't want any type of light source shining on anything. So as you can see here, every time I took a shot, I basically had someone's light in the photo. But finally, I was able to get the shot that I wanted, and here it was here. So, and of course, I aimed it in a way, or composed it in a way so that the Sagittarius was right over the kettles. So that was definitely one of my favorite pictures for that year. And now later on in that year again, so you can tell I definitely did a lot of traveling. And this was in August for the Perseid meteor shower. I really wanted to be down south in California for that. But also we know there's a problem in the summer where we tend to get a lot of forest fires. And this happened to be the worst year for forest fire and wildfire smoke. Actually, if you look at a satellite image from August 2018, you could see that there was smoke everywhere. And I checked the maps before I went on the trip, and nothing was changing. You could see like there was no airflow that would be pushing any of the smoke out of the way. But then, you know, you just have to make the best of it anyway. And here I am in the Sequoia National Park, and with a picture here of the hazy Milky Way. And you can see that that these are probably the largest redwood trees in the world. It's about 50 to 85 meters high, and the diameter of them is 6 to 8 meters across, or in diameter. And they're just pretty incredible, just being in this area with those type of trees and taking nightscapes. The green light that you see in the image is basically coming from a parking lot. So basically that particular night also we wanted to get a good vantage point for the Perseid meteor shower. So we figured that if we go a little bit higher, then maybe we could get out of the smoke. And we decided to climb Morro Rock. And Morro Rock is a 300-foot climb up a steep staircase. And basically, you're at this point, you're at 6,700 feet above the sea level. And it really helped that during this climb, it was dark. So I didn't actually see how crazy the view was, because I'm a little bit afraid of heights. But you're going to see, like in the next picture, how precarious it was up there, you know, with the railings and everything like that. But the view is absolutely amazing. Here we're able to overlook the city of Three Rivers and the San Joaquin Valley, and you can still see there's smoke lingering in the air. But then the further up you point your camera, the more clarity you can see for the night sky. So it really helped, but unfortunately that particular night, I didn't have very good luck with catching many meteors. But here's a panorama that I ended up putting together when I was up on top of this Morro Rock. You can see the railing, and then there's a really strong drop. And this pano now, the plan was to make it 360 degrees. So just panning my camera around, but the advantage to doing these type of panorama shots is that you can get endless combinations of compositions. So you can frame, I put the frames into a software called PTGUI, which is a very popular panorama stitching software. And with that, you can basically create so many different panoramic images. And you could see here all the different options that you can get. But one thing I didn't realize at the time was I didn't take pictures near my feet. So of course there's this black hole where I'm standing, but still I tried to work with what I had at that time. And so here's another composition, a little crazy, but it's just a really good way if you want to maximize your time at a spot, just to take a really good 360 pano, and then you can create all kinds of compositions. So with that picture, I realized that, you know, with that hole, it wasn't going to work out. So I had to use some content-aware tool in Photoshop to eventually fill in that missing area. And then this is what I ended up getting. So this was the final image that I was really happy with. And you can see I actually did catch one Perseid meteor. So also in the trip, I was able to visit a place called Grizzly Falls, and I'm not surprised by the name, because in this particular area of the Kings Canyon, there were so many bears that I saw, and it was pretty scary just being in the pitch black, surrounded by all these trees, and knowing that, you know, a bear could be around. So my friend, he actually had night vision binoculars, so he was kind of looking out and just making sure there are no animals approaching at the time when we were taking these shots. But in this particular image, you really can see with this 48-second long exposure, you can see that how we take for granted how much light we actually get from the night sky, because I'm surrounded by trees, and this was just a tiny little gap in the sky with the Milky Way. And then this is a 5-minute exposure. So still, like this particular shot, if you zoom in, there's so much noise, because of course when you're taking pictures in the summer heat, you get a lot of that noise. But I also figured that, you know, it just wasn't going to work out for me to just take 5 like really, really long exposures like this. So we had to resort to other methods, such as light painting. So this is probably the only time that I actually decided that, you know, I'm going to give into this light painting and use a flashlight and shine around the scenery. And we did it in small pieces. So you could see we highlighted certain parts of the waterfalls and the rocks. And then when I got home, I stitched it all together, and then was finally able to create this image. And I tried to make it look as natural, but as dreamy as possible, of course. And yeah, so that was one of my favorite shots from that particular trip. Now, this was a place that I was never expecting that I would ever end up visiting in my life. So it was such a cool opportunity to go to China. This was basically later on in the year towards the fall. And I was in contact with Optolong Astrofilter Company. They were, we basically communicated a lot for the past year, and you know, they had me testing out some of their filters, and then they decided, you know, they wanted me to come to China and check out their factory. So I was super thrilled with that, and jumped for the opportunity, even though it was like, you know, pretty scary experience just traveling across to the other side of the world by yourself. But they were so amazing with their hospitality, and they made sure I was completely taken care of. Well, I had ended up having major jet lag when I got there, and it was to the point where I actually thought I was getting the flu. And I remember that particular day when I was really feeling at my worst, they were saying, "Oh, let's go out and we're just going to take a quick little shot, just quick little picture, you know, with the banner and with everyone under the stars." So I thought, oh, okay, you know, but I really didn't want to go because I wasn't feeling well. But little did I realize that after this 2-hour long bumpy drive into the higher elevations, they took me to this graveyard of P-40 warhawks. And these warhawks were an important part of the city of Kunming in China. During World War II, a group of US pilots were instrumental in saving the city from devastation. So in the middle is one of the warhawks. And when I saw this, like some of you know that I love airplanes, I love the stars. So this was like a paradise to me. I couldn't believe that I was in this location, and instantly I got better. And I was just taking pictures for quite a while, actually, to the point where they were begging me, saying, "Oh, we're cold. Can we go now? Let's go." So, but anyways, it was just such a memorable time, despite not feeling well. And the rest of the trip was pretty amazing after that. And then the next year, I went back to Chile, my favorite place now. And we traveled to Easter Island. And Easter Island was quite interesting because I ended up going during a time when the weather was actually really bad. So I seemed to be getting bad luck with weather. And a lot of people joke and say, "Oh, you're a meteorologist. You're supposed to know when to go to places, and you're supposed to be getting good weather all the time," but that doesn't always happen. So with Easter Island, it was kind of deceiving because during the daytime, it was always beautiful, nice, fluffy clouds. And usually when we see these types of clouds, we're thinking that it's going to be nice and clear at night. But that wasn't the case here. It just kept getting cloudier and cloudier into the as the night came upon us. And this was basically, now I'm just sitting by the moai, which are the very iconic features of statues in the Easter Island. And I'm sitting here just with my camera, just hoping for a clear patch. So I got a little clear patch, then I get another little clear patch. I take this picture. At this point, the other photographers that were with me, they didn't even bother to put their camera on a tripod, but I wasn't going to give up on being in such a magical location like this. So I just kept shooting anyways. And another little clear patch. So I figured, you know what, when I go home, I'm going to stitch them all together. And that's what I did in Photoshop. And then here, this is my final image from that particular trip. So actually it's hard to tell, but this is Orion, the upside down part of Orion here. And you could see Bernard's Loop is the red. So it looked pretty cool with the clouds. And then also later that year, I ended up going to Australia. And the purpose for this particular trip was to do a workshop for locals in the Melbourne area, and to teach them how to do post-processing of nightscape images. So, and also part of the purpose of that trip was also to do scouting for possible places to do in the field workshops. So that's, oh yeah, that's me basically teaching the workshop. We had a really nice turnout. But after the workshop was finished, or the masterclass was finished, we went to the Grampians, and you can see like this place is just so amazing. The view is incredible. And this was an amazing, like I was really excited for this trip in particular because I never actually was able to see, I've never seen the galactic center, the full galactic center high in the sky, because every time I've gone south of the equator, it's been at the wrong time of year. So this was November, when it was near the end of this Milky Way galactic center season. So here you could see we had like so many cameras with us, and we just wanted to record and document as much as possible up on top of this hill in the Grampians. And as the sun got lower and the sky got darker, you could see here is Mercury and Venus is setting, and just waiting for the Milky Way to appear. And then, you know, just seeing this for the first time was just incredible. So this here is a panorama image. That particular night we did time-lapse shots. I just basically soaked up every single photon that I could possibly soak up, just because I just don't know how many times I'll be able to experience something like this, to see the whole galactic center going right across, like the Milky Way going right across the sky like that. And then fast forwarding now to another workshop. This was in the spring of 2019. I went to Spain, Menorca, an island off of Spain. And the purpose of this was for the Photopills camp. There's an app called Photopills, and basically every year they put this workshop on. So I was really happy to be invited to kind of help out with it. And this location was pretty incredible because I just find like the diversity in the landscape was just unbelievable. Here you can see like there are a lot of people on this trip, probably the largest group of people taking photos in one particular spot. And here's a shot of one of the famous lighthouses, Favoritics Lighthouse. And we are all trying to take pictures of the Milky Way rising behind the lighthouse. And as you can see, you know, with the large group of people, you don't always get the perfect conditions. Lights going off here and there, and you can see the red lights lit up the rocks. And actually this ended up being my favorite picture, despite it being a light polluted shot with the red lights. So I kind of thought that this looked like, you know, red flowers in the rocks. And some people thought that it looked like lava. So it ended up becoming one of my favorites. And here's an example of the Photopills app in action. We went to another location that was also pretty incredible. It was like being in the desert, but with these big giant boulders. So before it got dark, I was running around taking shots and trying to use the Photopills app to see how I can make my composition with the Milky Way and the rocks. And this was one of the images that I was able to get. So it was kind of close. I ended up moving around for a little bit more in the end, but this was a stack. I did like a panorama and stacked images together. So it took quite a bit of post-processing to get this together, but I was really happy with the results from that one. And now just staying a little bit closer to home, the Canadian Rockies. Believe it or not, this was one of my first times with a DSLR in the Rockies. So it was a pretty cool experience being in that nightscaping photo taking mode on this trip. The one thing though with this trip is that we had a lot of air glow. So you can see that air glow can kind of ruin things if you don't know exactly what you're looking at. It looks very muddy in the sky to the unaided eye. Like you're looking up and you're expecting to see the Milky Way and you can't really see it. But and you don't see the colors with your unaided eye, but with the camera will pick it up, even faintly will pick it up, but sometimes it's misleading and you think that it's camera noise or something unappealing. So I'll just show you like a really quick little time lapse of me photo editing, and just to show you like what the raw pictures actually look like from one of those nights of taking pictures. So you can see it just looks like really muddy in the night sky, and you'd be tempted to just use noise reduction and get rid of all of it. But if you do some careful analysis of it and you're very careful with how you're post-processing, you can bring out these colors and then make a nice image out of it. I'll try to fast forward it just a little bit here. So you can see I kind of go through a lot of steps when I do any post-processing. But I really enjoy this part of nightscaping. It's probably one of my favorite parts. I find like typically when I get really excited to take photos when it's during the day, but then once the night comes around, I get so tired and I do things pretty quickly. And then the next day I get excited to load the photos and start editing. So it's kind of funny. I don't think I was really born for this staying up all night thing, but I do it anyways because it's rewarding in the end when you see the final image. And here is the final image. And this ended up being the back cover of the Observer's Handbook. I think it was 2019 or 2020. I can't remember, but it was just recent. And now, so if you can't travel around or if you don't want to travel, then you can always take photos from home. And that sometimes can be just as rewarding as traveling. And this picture here I took in my front yard. I live in Grimsby, so the light pollution is there definitely, but sometimes we have a really nice transparent night and I can see the Milky Way overhead very, very faintly, as you can see here. It's a picture of the summer triangle with the echinacea flowers. Also star trails. You can never, you can always do star trail images in light polluted skies. So you can see my neighbors have their lights on theirs, and there's the town of Grimsby lights below and city of Toronto across the lake there. So I have lots of light pollution, but still star trails can turn out really nicely. And then this particular shot that was taken in Humber Bay, the Humber Bay Park. And this was after one of the workshops that I gave on post-processing. And the moon was actually really bright that day as well. It was almost a full moon. And you could see the light off into the corner there. So even with that, with being in the city of Toronto, with the full moon, you can still see Orion and get some nightscape pictures. And then, of course, the highlight of 2020 was Comet Neowise. It really brought light to, such a, kind of a discouraging year for so many. But, it worked out really well here. I took a shot. I used the PhotoPills app and I planned this image to line up have the comet lined up over the CN Tower from Grimsby. So this is the Grimsby view with looking across the lake, 30 miles across the lake or so. And, I just really look forward now to the years ahead, and hopefully we can get back into traveling again. And hopefully this inspired you a little bit to travel the world. And if not, then there's always something you could do at home. And even if you're in light polluted skies. And if you're ever interested at all in joining me on any workshops or anything like that, just drop me an email and follow me on Instagram. I have a lot of my photos on Instagram right now. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Kerry-Ann, for sharing your amazing photos. Truly, truly well done. And I had no idea you had done so much travel. I guess you must have accumulated a lot of air miles for your next trips.
I did. I did actually.
Yes, a bit of a pause.
Yeah, I was actually really scared of traveling before I went to Chile. So it just kind of I built up my confidence over time slowly, and then it became kind of an addiction, actually. I mean, a healthy addiction, I think.
Very
I
good.
got to see a lot of the night sky and make a lot of new connections and see the world. So
Good. Well, we look forward to a future presentation in the next year or two.
yeah.
Let's go to Emma for questions.
Okay, first question is, do you use astronomy specific cameras like the 60DA?
Yeah, I use the Canon 6D. I actually have two of them. I have one that's modified that I bought modified from Astro Tech. So I use two Canon 6Ds right now. One that's modified, one that's not modified. And so, I mean, you don't need to use a modified camera all the time because it just depends on what you're taking a picture of. Like with just regular Milky Way shots, you don't really need a modified camera, but if anything that has predominantly hydrogen in the night sky, then especially if you're zooming in on an area like Cygnus, then you probably want to pull out a modified camera to take those shots.
Yeah, thanks. Do you have a recommendation for a Nikon lens for someone who is very new to DSLR astronomy?
Oh dear, I don't use Nikon, but I have some friends that swear by, I think it's there's a zoom lens, f2.8. I don't know if it's like the 14 millimeter to 24 or something like that. But anyways, I don't know for Nikon, but for Canon, definitely recommend the Sigma lenses, the Sigma art lenses in particular, and the Sigma 14 millimeter f1.8 is my favorite, and I do believe that you can adapt that to Nikon frame as well. So that's probably my top recommendation for Nightscape lenses out there right now. So Sigma art 14 millimeter f1.8.
Very nice. Paul wants to know what tracker you use, brand and model.
I use a whole lot of trackers, believe it or not. I have the Skywatcher and also an Ioptron tracker as well. A lot of them are pretty old, but in the field, sometimes I will just end up just using the tripod, especially for nightscapes. I just use the tripod with timed exposures, and then I stack. But the Star Adventurer is definitely one of the best trackers that I would recommend for traveling with, because it's nice and light, and it works really well. So, and if you have a larger lens too, you can also do some deep sky with it as well.
How long have you been doing astrophotography, and where did you learn?
Oh goodness. I've been taking pictures of the night sky since I was 15 years old. So I'm kind of giving away my age, but it's probably like more than 30 years now on and off. But it was in 2007 was when I really started to get into doing more of the deep sky stuff. And I didn't really have any courses. When I was a kid in high school, I just went to the library and read some books on astrophotography, and a lot of the astrophotography back then, it was done on film. So I basically just guessed at exposure times and just wasted a lot of film, wasted a lot of money, just trial and error and trying to get something. But when digital photography came around, it was just so amazing, because then you could actually, you don't have to waste all the film and time and money. You could really learn a lot faster that way. And then also with the help of the internet, and Cloudy Nights was one of the websites that I really visited a lot, and I participated in a lot to learn a lot of the deep sky astrophotography that I know now.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Guillermo wants to know, it seems you picked ISO 6400 as the sweet spot for your camera rig. What was your criteria for that setting?
I just wanted as much light as possible without getting too much noise. So if I went a little higher than 6400, I just found that when it came to post-processing, the noise was a little bit more unbearable to deal with. And 3200 was just, you know, it was kind of similar to having 6400 anyway. So I just found that the 6400 was the spot where I knew I could handle the amount of noise and deal with that, but also get the most in terms of signal. So it was basically a lot of trial and error for me. But it turns out that a lot of people seem to like that that ISO as well, for the Canon 6D in particular. But I know with mirrorless cameras, it's different. I think you can go a lot higher with mirrorless cameras, but I don't have mirrorless camera to be able to like tell you exactly what ISO I would use for that.
Interesting. Would you recommend photo pills?
Oh yeah, totally. Definitely recommend it. I love it, especially if you're using an iPhone, which I don't have, but if you use an iPhone that has like a nice interface. Also, I recommend using Sky Safari. I use that it has a live view mode, so you can actually be in the field and do this virtual reality kind of view where you can see the stars along with the nightscape, with the actual landscape, and kind of line up create your composition during the day and just set the time for at night for that location. And photo pills, I believe that they might probably expand their virtual reality setup to include more like constellations and more than just the Milky Way and the moon and the stars, at moon and the sun, because right now it's focused more on the Milky Way, moon and sun timing. So, but yeah, definitely photo pills is one of the best apps and one of my most favorite apps that I like to use.
Other than that, are there any other plugins that you would recommend?
I mean, there's Photographer's Ephemeris, but I don't think you can do Milky Way planning with that. And there's also Planet Pro. That's another a good option for planning nightscape images as well. So there's quite a few out there right now for planning.
That's it. That's all the questions we have from the YouTube chat.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Kerry-Ann, if you don't mind, I just thought of a question myself. You mentioned sky glow when you were talking about the Rockies.
Yeah.
Did you have
the airglow?
Airglow. Did you have a problem elsewhere in the world with airglow?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like almost everywhere where I've been, we had some airglow, especially in the Atacama Desert in particular tends to have a bit more airglow now over the years. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like I've been noticing it a lot more and more over the years, for sure. Okay. Yeah.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very well. Thanks again, Kerry-Ann, for sharing your amazing photos. And as I said before, we look forward to having you on again in the future.
Yeah. Thanks.
So now I think we're ready to move on to our next speaker. Jerry Vila will talk to us about Tycho Brahe, Danish astronomer, and his legacy.
Yes, good evening, everybody. That was rather a very interesting presentation. I will start my presentation now, hopefully maximizing the PowerPoint from the beginning. This presentation is about Tycho Brahe. He was born in 1546 at Kanstrup Castle, Scandia. At the time, that was a part of the Kingdom of Denmark and Norway. If you wonder where the Scandia is, it's the southernmost tip of Sweden. But at that time, it was the Denmark, Norway. Small picture, take it off. Okay. Well, he died in October 1601, age 54, in Prague, of the Holy Roman Empire. He was a Danish nobleman, astronomer, and writer. He is known for the most accurate astronomical observations of his time. Tycho received an extensive education. He took an interest in astronomy and science in his early age. He studied at the universities of Copenhagen, Leipzig, and Rostock. Tycho's interest in astronomy started at the age of 13 when he watched a partial eclipse of the sun. He was amazed that it was possible to predict the day, thought not the hour, of its occurrence. It struck him as something divine. He began his observations and soon became conflicted by the inaccuracies of Ptolemy predictions. On August 24th, 1563, he watched a conjunction of the Jupiter and Saturn, as we did about 2 months ago, and found that the time of the closest approach was days away from the Ptolemy tables. After that, he dedicated himself to compile accurate record of the position of the stars and planets. Well, for that, he needed state-of-the-art equipment, and that cost money. On November 1572, Tycho Brahe observed a very bright star. It was a supernova 1572, which unexpectedly appeared in the constellation of Cassiopeia. He went out for the night walk, looked at the sky as he was used to, and was amazed. There was a star that never was there before. The bright star didn't move in relation to other stars. Tycho repeatedly measured star parallax every 6 months, but could not observe any parallax. Hence, the star must be very far away, or Earth did not move, he concluded. Now, there's the picture of the constellation of Cassiopeia, and here is Nova Stella, that's new star that appeared in 1572. On your right-hand side, that's the current view by Hubble telescope of the supernova. It didn't move, it's still here, but it's much dimmer. Something about this person's life. He was brought up by his uncle, foster father, who supposedly kidnapped him when he was 2 years old. Now the couple had about 16 children, so maybe one less or one more didn't count that much. Later, Tycho defied both his natural and foster parents to become a scientist, rather than a nobleman at the Danish royal court. He never married, but lived with a woman who was not of a noble status, and perhaps that was the reason he didn't marry her. They had 8 children together. It was at the University of Rostock where he lost a bridge of his nose in a sword duel with his cousin over an argument who was a better mathematician. Tell that to the kids now. Since that time, he wore a prosthetic nose and was known as the man with a golden nose. His foster father / uncle had saved King Frederick II of Denmark from drowning, but died of pneumonia as a result. The grateful king responded with hefty grants to the young astronomer. With it, Tycho invited craftsmen to build Uraniborg, a great observatory on the island of Hven. He also searched Europe for the finest instruments, like quadrants and armillaries, and improved on them. The magnificent Uraniborg castle was equipped with a chemical laboratory, a printing press, flush toilets, quarters for visiting researchers, a private jail, and even a clairvoyant dwarf. He was also known to keep an elk or a moose there. This is the castle observatory at its glory. The center of the observatory was a gleaming brass celestial globe, 5 feet in diameter, on which 1,000 stars were inscribed. Tycho was hardworking and charted the position of the stars and planets night after night. Local peasants, however, disliked him. They moved to that island to escape serfdom, to be free peasants. And they disliked Tycho. Why? They found him overbearing and were ordered by the Danish king to work for Tycho, 2 days every week, becoming his serfs. Tycho's accurate observations became the foundation for his understanding of the solar system. He devised the Earth-based solar system, a compromise between Ptolemy and Copernicus system. This was after the Copernicus publication was already out in a print. His system had a stationary Earth right here in the middle, orbited by the moon and the sun, that in turn was orbited by other known planets. So this was yet another system. Using his measurements, Tycho showed that comets were also non-atmospheric phenomena as previously thought. And that's what you see here is the portrait. It's not a photograph, sorry, the cameras haven't been invented yet, of the great comet of 1577. His conclusion refuted the Aristotelian system of unchanging heavenly space. I wish we would have a photographer back then there, but this is just a painting. When he realized that the towers of Uraniborg were not adequate as observatories because of the instrument exposure to the elements and the movement of the building due to windy conditions, he constructed a second observatory. The new observatory was built on the same island, but was underground at nearby Steenborg in 1581. If you ever were in Denmark, you will notice it's typically windy. And you don't just have to be on the island. So this is that partially underground observatory built on the same island, and that's at the Steenborg. Tycho published several books in his lifetime. In 1598, he described his instruments used in Uraniborg and Steenborg in his book, Instruments for the Restoration of Astronomy. However, Denmark had a new king. His name was Christian IV in 1597. And there was a disagreement between the new king and the Tycho. Tycho went into exile. In 1599, he was invited by Bohemian king and Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II to Prague. In Prague, he received the title of the Imperial Court Astronomer to the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II. And this is the picture of one of the towers in Prague, just over the old town bridge. Now, Tycho was an observer and not a theorist. His contribution to the cosmology was a compromised geocentric model that created as many problems as it solved. He needed someone with the skills and perseverance to compose his data into a scientific system. So while in Prague, he invited well-known German mathematician Johannes Kepler, and I talked about the Kepler about a year ago. He invited him there as his assistant, with whom he shares some of his observations. And this is the picture of Johannes Kepler. They frequently argue. Kepler threatened to leave, but they continue to work together. Tycho was also engaged while in Prague in astrology and alchemy, as most scientists of the time, including Sir Isaac Newton, some 100 years later. Outside of Prague, Tycho built an observatory at Benátky, and that's sort of a current picture here. And that's where he recorded his best observations. In Prague, he was assisted by Johannes Kepler, as I noted earlier, who later used Tycho's astronomical data to discover the three fundamental laws of the planetary motion. Here is another picture. Tycho Brahe is standing here on the left. In the middle, the Emperor Rudolf II is seated, and he was his patron at the time. Tycho kept his observations close to his chest. When Kepler protested he got not much to do, Tycho realized he must give something of substance to Kepler. Mars, as Tycho knew, and Kepler did not, presented an almost impossible challenge. This planet near to the Earth has been well measured, but moved most erratically. Kepler said he would have figured it out in 8 days. He was still working on the problem 8 years later. In all, Kepler tested 70 circular orbits against Tycho Mars data. This consumed 900 pages of calculus, but it still failed. Finally, he tried to imagine what motion of Mars would look from the Sun. At last, his calculations yielded their results. The orbit of the planet is a perfect ellipse. No need for epicycles or crystalline spheres. Here is the monument to Tycho Brahe and Johannes Kepler in Prague that was erected in 1983. This would be Tycho, and here is a Johannes Kepler. In 1601, Tycho and Kepler attended a banquet. There was much eating and drinking. According to Kepler, Brahe refused to leave the table to relieve himself. It would have been improper to leave without permission from the nobility. He suffered through the banquet and later was in pain. He died 11 days later. This is a Gothic tin church or cathedral in Old Town in Prague, and that's where Tycho Brahe was buried. The cathedral interior is, however, in Baroque because it takes 100 years to finish it often. So this is the Baroque interior of the church that was started to be built in 19th century in a place of a much older church. In 15th century, this church became a Hussite church. During the 30-Year War, it was returned back to Catholic faith. On this slide, there is a relief of Tycho Brahe about his tombstone inside the tin church. Now, the cause of this was probably a bear's bladder and subsequent infection. Some base metals were found in his remains, most likely the result of his alchemy work. Tycho's body has been exhumed twice. Once in 1901, that was 300 years after his death. This first exhumation was effectively just to confirm whether there was somebody buried. And secondly, who it was. The time goes by and there are revolution, uprising, and wars. Well, they discovered somebody was there, and in the middle of his skull, where the nose is, there was a green stain, probably from a brass nose. And again, the body was exhumed in 2010 to examine the circumstances of his death and to identify the material from which his artificial nose was made. The conclusion was that his death was likely caused by a bear's bladder and not by poisoning as has been suggested. His artificial nose was made of brass rather than silver or gold, as some have believed in his time. That was the conclusion of Danish and Czech researchers in 2012. Perhaps his use of silver or gold prosthetic was only for special occasions. This is 2010 exhumation. At this point, there is the removal of the tombstone from his grave. Now, what will be the Tycho Brahe legacy? Although Tycho planetary model was soon discredited, his astronomical observations were an essential contribution to the scientific revolution. The impact crater on Moon is called Tycho. It's the one shown here on the right side in his honor, as is the crater Tycho Brahe on Mars and the minor planet 1677 Tycho Brahe in the asteroid belt. The bright supernova SN 1572 is also known as Tycho's nova. There is a Tycho Brahe planetarium in Copenhagen. There is a side view of that Tycho crater on Moon. And here is the view of the crater on the moon. It can be seen with the unaided eye or binoculars. I'm going to keep it short, so there is a time for questions here. So I will conclude with this. Tycho Brahe was a man whose exact measurements of the sky immensely contributed to scientific revolution. I thank you for attention. If you have any question, please write them down. And perhaps you would like to also see, on a lighter note, a part of the Mars landing by NASA that hasn't been shown to the public media. You know, the NASA landed recently.
That's it.
That's it. We have a visual.
Target has been acquired.
We have water! Get water!
This changes everything.
Grab it all, and then you hustle out of here. We got a storm coming.
Open the hatch. We're coming.
We're witnessing history, the discovery of a lifetime.
The conditions won't be that good for another 2 years. We just made it.
Can't wait to get you home.
That was the Mars water.
Oh, I thought it said Mark's water.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jerry. You always like to show those funny clips at the end. Very good. And thank you for the presentation as well, of course. Do we have any questions for Jerry?
We do. The first question is, why kidnap him and how was the uncle not caught?
Well, I can only answer that question to what I read. He was taken from his family. Now, there were 16 children in that family. Not all of them lived to the adulthood. So if his uncle had, quote unquote, kidnapped Tycho Brahe, there was no big fuss about it. And they brought him up, and well, he didn't want to serve the king. He rather served the scientific revolution. So that's how he was kidnapped. He was simply taken by his uncle.
Okay. Where did he go when he went into exile in 1597?
Well, he traveled around Europe looking for employment. And it happened that the Emperor Rudolf II, who at the time resided in Prague, he was interested in many things: art, science, astronomy, astrology, and chemistry. So he invited him to Prague. He got the invitation from the emperor in 1599.
Blake wants to know, was it Tycho that defined the obsolete quadrant murals constellation?
Again, was it Tycho who what?
Defined the obsolete quadrants murals constellation.
Quadrant. He had a number of the quadrants. He had improved on the quadrants that were used for measuring of the stars and their position, because that was before the advent of the telescope. Do I understand the question correctly?
Well, maybe I can step in. If I'm not sure if Blake can, but so Jerry, there is a constellation which is
quadrant constellation.
Yeah, quadrant muralis. Yes.
I saw that you were talking about the instrument which he was measuring the stars. I do not know. He discovered many of the stars and many of the constellations that were all noted on that celestial globe that he kept in his observatory. So many, many stars and planets, well, not the planets, stars were noted on that globe.
Do you know who painted the painting of Tycho and Rudolph II?
No, I do not know. I can check on the internet again where I found that picture and see if there is a painter's name on it. But I do not know.
Okay, last question from Blake. If a star catalog can be named using Mr. Brahe's first name, is there a hope for me, a stellar catalog named Blake or blah?
A star catalog named after Blake.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the question?
Yes.
Well, why not? I'm in favor of it.
Great. Thank you. That's all the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emma, and thanks again, Jerry, for your presentation. So that concludes our speakers lineup. Next is our president, Tom Luton, with the announcements. Before we go to Tom, I'd like to thank our presenters once again. I know it takes an awful long time to prepare a presentation, so thanks again for making the effort and sharing the content with us. Good, so let's go ahead with Tom and the announcements.
Thanks, Paul. Well, good evening, everybody. So, get right into the announcements then. So, as you might have heard already, we've got two types of meetings here at the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada Toronto Centre. We have our Recreational Astronomy Nights, which you've just taken part in, and we have our Speakers Nights in 2 weeks' time. So, if you're new here and you like what you see and you'd like to come back, the next time you're by, say hello. Enter some questions for the presenters into the chat. If you're a new member, introduce yourself. And if you're from a place far, far away, please let us know where you're from. Our next Speakers Night meeting is on the 17th at 7:30. Professor Nikki van der Merel will be discussing planets under construction, how to study a million-year process. Our next Recreational Astronomy Night is Wednesday, the 7th of April at 7:30. Blake Nancarroll will be discussing the sky this month. Francois Van Heerden, the Astro Video Learning Curve, fine-tuning settings to get results. And Ron McNaughton, microbial mats on Earth and Mars. And if you'd like to present something yourself, contact Paul Markov. What's going on at the DDO? Well, this coming Saturday at 7 p.m., Adazi Ibik, and I apologize, I've mangled that name, we'll be discussing the life cycle of stars. There's a fee and you have to register online. The links can be found at rascto.ca. DDO Up in the Sky on the 27th of March at 8:30. The fee varies depending on your age, and again, the links are on our website. And DDO Ask an Astronomer is on the 28th of March at 1 p.m., hosted by Chris Vaughn, with $12.50 fee and online registration. Now, Toronto Centre's famous education and public outreach activities have, for the most part, actually entirely been shut down thanks to the COVID outbreak, but we are working on virtual star parties and EPO talks with the Ontario Science Centre, Millennium Square, David Dunlop Observatory, the St. Clair O'Connor Community, the Dunlap Institute, Brownies, Cubs, Scouts, schools, and we're also looking at new Observers to Visual Astronomy course. So please contact public education at rascto.ca for more info. Unfortunately, our observing sessions that would normally take place at Baby Village Park, at the Long Sault Conservation Area, or at the Ontario Science Centre are closed for the immediate future. As well, the Carr Astronomical Observatory is closed until further notice. There's only maintenance going on. Now, even with things shut down, we are in need of volunteers to help out. So if you're a RAS Toronto Centre member and if you're interested in helping and you've got some free time, please drop us a line at volunteer@rascto.ca. Specifically, we've got some job postings currently open. We are looking for a light pollution committee head, National Council representative, a marketing committee chair and committee members, as well as some additional hands to help with our AV committee. Again, volunteer at rascto.ca. Update to our Stellarium training series. Our level 2 course for March 22nd is full, and it's got a fairly lengthy waiting list. We are planning more courses, including at least one course, a level 1, that will be scheduled for Pacific Standard Time as opposed to Eastern Standard Time. We've got level 3 courses planned, as well as a Stellarium for educators planned. rascto.ca/content/Stellarium training series for more info. It's the part where I get to plug the Rask membership. If you're interested, if you like what you see, there are additional benefits that come with membership, so please join us. You can renew online at secure.rask.ca. If COVID has presented some financial difficulties, the Rask does have an emergency fund. It's completely confidential. You just give a shout to Adela at the national office at mempub@rask.ca for details. And with that, I'd like to wish you all a very good night and thank you for joining us. Please follow us on all the social media forums, and please like and subscribe and hit the notification bell for further YouTube updates. Thank you very much. Be safe and keep looking up. Good night.